A Werewolf Romance, writing by Joyce Meyer. Prologue. The Taste of Ash. I was 5 years old the first time I understood that some people are born to kneel. Not because they're weak, not because they deserve it, but because someone stronger decided their backbone would make a good footstool. My name is Allison Grayridge, and I was born in the mud at the lowest point of pack territory, where the waste runs and nothing clean ever grows. They called me Cinderpaw. Broken blood, the girl who tasted like ash. This is the story of how I went from living platter to building an empire. How I learned that prominence isn't about standing on top of others. It's about making sure no one has to kneel the way I did. But let me take you back to the beginning. To the day they made my father kneel before the standing stone. To the sound of his skull cracking. To the moment I learned that mercy is just another word for weakness, in a world run by wolves who've forgotten what it means to be human. Part 1. The Sound of Breaking. Chapter 1. Ashbread and Broken Promises, Grayridge Pack Territory, age 5. The ashbread came once a week. I remember because I counted the days by the hollow ache in my stomach. Monday through Saturday, we ate whatever scraps we could scrounge from the edge of pack territory. Roots that grew in the polluted runoff, occasional fish from the creek that tasted like copper, birds too stupid or sick to fly away when I threw rocks. But Sunday was ashbread day. I'd wake before dawn and walk the quarter-mile from our hut to the central fires where the pack gathered for their morning meal. The warriors ate first, thick slabs of venison, fresh eggs, bread that steamed when you tore it open. The betas ate second. The omegas ate third. And then there was us. My job was to wait until everyone had finished. To stand at the edge of the clearing with the other low-status families, the punishment cases, the disgraced, the genetically unfortunate, and watch them eat. Watch them laugh. Watch them throw away more food than we'd see in a month. When the fires had burned down to coals and the pack had dispersed, I was allowed to approach. The ashbread was exactly what it sounds like. The burnt, blackened edges of the loaves that had been left too close to the flames. Hard as stone. Tasting like charcoal and failure. I'd gather it in my threadbare apron, usually 3 or 4 pieces if I was lucky, and carry it home like treasure. "Good girl," Mother would say, her voice flat and dead. She'd been beautiful once, I think. Before Father's punishment. Before the mud hut. Before I was born and became another mouth to feed in a family that had nothing. She never looked at me directly anymore. Just past my shoulder, like I was a ghost she'd learned to live with. Father was different. He'd take the ashbread with hands that still remembered being strong, and he'd try to make it into something edible, soaking it in creek water, grinding it into paste, mixing it with whatever roots I'd found. "Feast for a queen," he'd say, placing the gray slop in front of me with ceremony. I'd eat it and pretend I believed him. The winter. The winter was when Father found the hare. I remember because it was the first time I'd seen him smile in months, maybe years. Time was hard to track when every day looked like the last. He came back from one of his dawn walks. He couldn't sleep anymore, hadn't been able to since the demotion, with something wrapped in his torn shirt. "Look," he whispered to Mother, glancing toward the hut opening like someone might be listening. "Fresh game, off territory but clean. We can eat tonight. Really eat." Mother's dead eyes flickered with something that might have been hope, might have been fear. "Where did you get it?" she asked. "The border. Just past the marker stones. It was alone. Sick, maybe. Easy kill. And if they smell it? If they know it's not from our territory?" Father's smile didn't fade. "They won't. I'll prepare it with the smoke herbs you gather. Mask the scent. We'll eat it inside quietly. No one has to know." I was too young to understand what I was watching. Too young to recognize the desperate calculation in my father's eyes. The way a man who'd been a warrior learns to think like a thief when his family is starving. All I knew was that we had meat. Real meat. Real meat. Not ashbread. Not root paste. Not the sick birds that even the carrion eaters wouldn't touch. Mother cooked it that night, using techniques she must have learned before the mud hut, before the fall. She made it tender and savory and perfect. We ate in silence, the three of us, in our leaning shack where the wind came through the walls and nothing was ever warm. And for those few minutes I felt what other children probably felt every day. Full, safe, loved. It lasted exactly one night. Chapter 2. The Standing Stone. The next morning, the enforcers came at dawn. I woke to the sound of our door being kicked open. 3 of them, huge, scarred warriors who reeked of dominance and barely controlled violence. They didn't bother with words. Just grabbed Father by his hair and dragged him out into the mud. Mother screamed. I'd never heard her scream before. The sound was raw and animal and wrong, coming from someone who'd been silent for so long. One of the enforcers, a beta named Bernard, who I'd seen around the pack fires, always laughing at the wrong things, shoved her back into the hut. "Stay, bitch," he said, "unless you want to join him." But Mother didn't stay. She grabbed me, actually grabbed me, her hands on my shoulders for the first time in months, and pulled me out after them. "Whatever he did," she said, her voice shaking, "I'll take the punishment. He has a daughter. Please." They ignored her. We followed them through the pack territory as the sun rose, other families emerging from their homes, warriors stretching, children playing. Normal morning sounds, until they saw where the enforcers were heading. The Standing Stone. It sat in the center of our territory, a massive granite monolith worn smooth by centuries of use. Old blood stained the base. New blood was added regularly. This was where pack justice happened. Public, brutal, permanent. By the time we reached it, half the pack had gathered. Word traveled fast when someone was about to be punished. Entertainment was rare in Grey Ridge. Alpha George was already there. He was massive even by wolf standards, nearly 7 feet in human form, built like something carved from violence and rage. His face was all hard angles and colder eyes. He looked at Father the way you'd look at a rat you were about to step on. Irritated that it existed, but ready to enjoy crushing it anyway. "Damon Greyridge," George's voice boomed across the clearing. "You stand accused of hunting off-territory game, of stealing from the sovereign grounds of our neighboring pack, of bringing foreign meat into our lands and endangering our treaties." Father knelt. Not because they forced him, because that's what you did before the Alpha. "I didn't know it was off-territory," Father said, and I could hear the lie in his voice. So could everyone else. "I was hunting near the border. The hare crossed into our lands. I followed pack law." "You followed your stomach," George interrupted. "You poached from our neighbors because you're too weak to provide for your family through legitimate means. You're an embarrassment to warrior bloodline, a stain on the Grey Ridge name." He paused, letting the words sink in, letting the gathered pack absorb the shame. "Normally," George continued, "theft of this nature would result in exile, banishment from pack lands. But you've already been demoted once for questioning my authority. You've already proven you can't learn through mercy." He smiled then. It was worse than his anger. "So today we teach a different lesson. One the entire pack will remember, especially the young ones who might think rules don't apply to them." George turned, and I followed his gaze, to a boy standing near the Alpha's side. Gregory, the Alpha's son. 12 years old. Tall for his age, but still gangly. Still had that softness around his eyes that boys lose when they become warriors. "Come here, pup," George said. Gregory approached slowly. He looked at Father, then at the Standing Stone, then at his father's face. I saw him understand. Saw the horror bloom in his eyes. "No," Gregory said quietly. "Father, I can't." The backhand was so fast I barely saw it. The sound echoed across the clearing like a gunshot. Gregory's head snapped to the side. Blood trickled from his split lip. "The young must learn pack justice," George said, his voice calm again. as if he hadn't just struck his own son hard enough to rattle teeth. Must learn that mercy is weakness, that strength requires difficult choices, that an alpha protects his pack by eliminating threats, even when those threats wear familiar faces. He pointed at the pile of smooth river stones beside the standing stone. Execution rocks, worn down by generations of use. Pick one up, pup. Prove your strength. Correct the betrayer. Gregory was shaking. I could see it from where I stood, pressed against Mother's side. Could see his hands trembling as he looked at the rocks. "Father, please," he said. "I'm not ready. I don't want to—" "Do it," George commanded, "or take his place." The first throw missed. Gregory's hand shook so badly the rock sailed past Father's head and clattered against the standing stone. The second throw hit Father's shoulder. Bounced off harmlessly. George made a disgusted sound. "Pathetic. Again. And this time, make it count. Or I'll demonstrate proper technique on you." Gregory picked up the third stone. His face was wet with tears. Snot ran from his nose. He looked like a child, which he was, being forced to do something no child should ever do. He looked at Father one more time. Father, to his credit, met the boy's eyes, nodded slightly, giving permission, giving forgiveness in advance for what was about to happen. The third stone left Gregory's hand with all the desperate strength of a boy trying to save himself. It struck true. The sound was, I can still hear it. 23 years later, I can still hear it in my dreams. Not a crack. A crunch. Wet and final and wrong. Like the sound of reality breaking. Father's head snapped to the side. His body went rigid for a moment, then slumped. Blood poured from his temple where the stone had connected. More than I thought could come from one wound. It pooled in the mud around his knees. Turned the dirt to red clay. Mother screamed again. The same raw animal sound, but longer this time. Sustained. Like she was trying to scream out everything that had been silent for years. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just watched as Father's eyes, still open, still aware, found mine across the clearing. I saw him try to speak, saw his mouth form words that never came out. Then I saw the light behind his eyes dim, not go out. Not yet, just dim. Like someone had turned down the brightness on everything that made him him. George surveyed his work with satisfaction. "Let this be a lesson," he announced to the gathered pack. "This is what becomes of wolves who steal, who lie, who put their own hunger above pack law." He looked at Gregory, who'd collapsed to his knees, still holding the bloody stone. "And this is what it means to be strong, to do what must be done, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. Remember this day, pup. Remember that mercy is for the weak, and weakness has no place in Grey Ridge." 1 week later, Father didn't die at the Standing Stone. That would have been mercy. Instead, he lingered. They carried him back to our mud hut and left him on the floor like garbage. Didn't send the pack healer, didn't offer medicine, didn't even close the door behind them. Just dumped him and left. Mother tried. I'll give her that. She packed moss around his head to slow the bleeding, dripped water into his mouth, whispered things I couldn't hear. But the damage was too deep. Whatever that stone had broken inside his skull, it couldn't be fixed with moss and whispered prayers. My job, because there was always a job, always something the lowest pack members had to do, was to change the moss packing twice a day, morning and night, every day for a week. I'd carefully pull away the old moss, crusted with blood, and that sickly sweet smell that meant infection. Clear fluid leaked from his ears. His breathing sounded wet. Wrong. And his eyes. When they were open, they didn't see anything. Just stared at the ceiling of our hut, tracking things that weren't there. Sometimes he'd speak. Not words, just sounds. Moaning. Whimpering. Once he grabbed my wrist while I was changing the packing. His grip was still strong. Still had that warrior strength buried underneath the broken skull. He looked right at me. And for just a second, I thought I saw recognition. Thought he knew who I was. Thought he might say something meaningful. But then his eyes rolled back and he started seizing. Body thrashing. Foam at his mouth. I held him down until it stopped. When it was over, whatever piece of him that had recognized me was gone. He died on the 7th day. Just stopped breathing during the night. No final words. No peaceful passing. Just stopped. Mother found him in the morning. She didn't scream this time. Just closed his eyes and went outside to tell the pack we had a body to remove. They came that afternoon. 2 junior warriors who drew the short straw for corpse duty. "Where do you want us to take him?" one asked. "The pyre?" Mother laughed. It was the worst sound I'd ever heard. "They don't burn Omega traitors," she said. "Take him to the bone field. Let the carrion birds have him." So they did. Wrapped father in our only blanket, the one Mother had kept from her life before, and carried him out like trash. I watched them go. Watched them disappear into the tree line that led to the bone field, where the pack left animals they'd killed for sport, where predators and scavengers came to feed. That was my father's final resting place. Not honored, not remembered. Just meat for the birds. Chapter 3. The Girl in the Mud. Age 6 to 12. After father died, Mother stopped being a person. I don't know how else to describe it. She still moved. Still breathed, still performed the basic functions of staying alive. But she wasn't there anymore. The thing that made her mother, whatever spark or soul or consciousness separated humans from meat, had left the same day they carried father to the bone field. She called me Little Burden in her rare moments of speech. "Eat your ash bread, Little Burden. Collect water from the creek, Little Burden. Stop crying, Little Burden. Tears waste salt." I learned to make myself smaller than shadows, to move through the pack territory like a ghost, to avoid eye contact, to never draw attention. The other pups called me Cinderpaw. Broken blood. The girl who tasted like ash. Their mothers would pull them away when I got too close. "Don't play with her," they'd whisper. "Shame is contagious. Failure runs in families." I spent most of my time alone. Alone at the ash bread collection. Alone at the creek, washing clothes in water that never got them clean. Alone in the forest, gathering roots and catching sick birds. Alone in the mud hut with a mother who'd forgotten how to see me. The only thing that kept me from disappearing entirely was reading. I'd found a book once, half buried in the refuse pile near our hut. Some wealthy pack member had thrown it away, water damaged, cover torn off, pages stuck together. But readable. It was about wolves in other packs, other territories. Places where hierarchy was based on merit instead of birth. Where Omegas could challenge. Where families weren't punished for generations because one member questioned authority. I read it so many times the pages fell out. Memorized entire passages. Created a world in my head where I wasn't Cinderpaw. Where father was still alive. Where mother looked at me like I was a daughter instead of a burden. Where I mattered. That fantasy world was the only thing that kept me breathing through the years between 6 and 12. The years where I learned that being invisible didn't protect you. It just meant no one noticed when you were hurt. Age 11, the hunting lessons. When I was 11, they started using me for hunting practice. Not the adult warriors. They had too much dignity for that. The pups, sons and daughters of betas and high-status omegas who needed to learn how to track, how to chase, how to bring down prey. I was the prey. It started accidentally. I was in the forest, gathering mushrooms that grew on the north side of fallen trees, when I heard them coming. 4 pups, maybe 13 or 14 years old. All shifted. All playing at being predators. They saw me and something shifted in their body language, from play to hunt. "There's Cinderpaw," one said, a girl named Sarah whose mother served in Alpha George's household. "Let's practice on her." I ran, not because I thought I could escape, but because running was what prey did. They chased me for what felt like hours, toying with me, letting me think I was getting away, then cutting me off, herding me in circles. When I finally collapsed from exhaustion, they surrounded me, didn't bite, didn't kill, just stood there, panting and proud, while I lay in the dirt trying to remember how to breathe. "Good hunt," Sarah said, shifting back to human form. "You run well for broken blood." Then they left, just walked away like it was nothing, like they hadn't just spent 2 hours treating a person like an animal. I lay there until dark. When I finally made it back to the mud hut, Mother didn't ask where I'd been, just pointed at my ash bread ration. "Eat, little burden. You're making the hut smell like sweat." The hunting lessons became regular. Once a week at first, then twice. Then whenever the pups were bored and I was visible, I learned their patterns, their tells, the way certain wolves always broke left, the way others got tired after the first sprint. I learned to run in ways that wasted their energy, through thorn bushes they'd avoid, through the creek where my scent would be harder to track. I learned to survive. But I also learned something else. I learned to hate. Not the hot, explosive rage that makes people scream and fight and lash out. The cold kind. The kind that settles in your chest like frozen iron and doesn't melt. The kind that waits. Chapter 4. The Broken Wolf Age. 12 First Shift. My first shift happened during a pack gathering. I'd been serving, that was my job now, bringing food and drink to the warriors and betas while they ate and laughed and told stories about hunts I'd never be invited on. I felt it coming about an hour before it hit. A heat that started in my spine and spread outward. A pressure under my skin like something was trying to get out. I knew what it was. Every wolf-born child knows what first shift feels like. I tried to leave. Tried to make it to the forest where I could shift in private, where no one would see. But the heat was building too fast. My bones started moving underneath my skin, popping out of joints, rearranging themselves. I made it maybe 20 feet from the central fires before I collapsed. Right there, in the middle of the gathering, in front of the entire pack. My body betrayed me in the most public way possible. The shift itself was agony. Every bone breaking and reforming, every muscle tearing and rebuilding, every sense suddenly amplified to the point of overload. But the humiliation was worse. I could hear them laughing even through the pain. "Look, Cinderpaw is finally shifting." About time. I thought broken blood couldn't shift at all. This should be entertaining. The shift completed in front of 300 pack members, and my wolf was... It was wrong. Not just small. Wrong. Gaunt where wolves should be powerful. Patchy gray fur where it should have been thick and lustrous. One front leg twisted slightly, like the bones hadn't set right. I looked exactly like what I was. Broken. The laughter got louder. Sarah, the same girl who'd led my first hunting lesson, pointed and howled with delight. "The broken blood whelp has a broken wolf. Look at it. It's a runt of a runt." Even the adults were smirking. Even the Omegas. Even the ones who should have known better. Alpha George stood from his seat at the head of the gathering, surveyed my wolf form with the same expression he'd had watching Father bleed out by the standing stone. Disgust. Disappointment. A kind of offended rage that something so inferior had dared to manifest in his territory. "This is a sign," he announced, "of the degeneracy in the Grey Ridge bloodline, of what happens when weakness is allowed to breed." He walked toward me. I tried to back away, but my twisted leg made me slow. Awkward. "Tonight we learn another lesson," George said, "about the proper place of defective wolves in a strong pack." He gestured to the warriors. "Bring the feast meat. Place it on her back." I understood then what he meant. They were going to use me as a serving platter, not metaphorically, literally. 4 warriors shifted and brought down a deer from where it hung at the edge of the clearing, still on the spit, still steaming. They placed it across my back like I was a table, The weight drove me to my belly. The heat from the cooked meat burned through my patchy fur. Fat dripped down my sides. "Serve the pack, Cinderpaw," George said, "in the only way a wolf like you can be useful." So I did. I lay there on my stomach, in my broken wolf form, while 300 pack members tore meat from my back, while they spilled wine over my fur, while they laughed and joked and treated me like furniture. Gregory was there, 16 now, taller, harder, his father's lieutenant. I saw him try to look away, saw George force his head back. "Watch," the alpha commanded his son. "This is what becomes of weakness. Remember it." The feast lasted 4 hours. When it was over, when they'd eaten their fill and wandered off to digest and fuck and sleep, I lay there in the dirt, covered in grease and wine and shame, my twisted leg throbbing, my patchy fur matted with food waste, and something inside me, something I hadn't known was still alive, crystallized. Not hope. Hope was for people who believed things could get better. This was different. This was the cold understanding that the world was divided into 2 types of wolves, the ones who knelt and the ones who made them. I was going to stop being the first type, even if it killed me. Chapter 5, The Creek Age, 12 to 16. The frozen creek became my sanctuary. It ran along the eastern edge of pack territory, fed by mountain runoff that kept it cold even in summer. Fast-moving water over smooth stones, clear enough to see the bottom. Clean. That's what I remember most. It was clean. Everything else in my life was mud and filth and the stink of failure. But the creek was pure. I'd go there after my chores, after the ash bread collection, after whatever humiliation the day had brought. I'd shift to my broken wolf form, because even deformed, my wolf could handle cold better than my human body, and submerge myself completely. Let the icy water numb the shame. Let it wash away the grease and wine and whatever else they'd spilled on me. Let it freeze the rage in my chest before it could explode and get me killed. The cold was the only thing that made existence bearable. That's where Gregory found me. Age 15, I was 16 when he started coming to the creek. Not hunting me, not mocking, just appearing on the bank while I lay in the shallows, letting hypothermia do its slow work. The first time, he said nothing, just sat on a boulder, watching the water flow, watching me pretend he wasn't there. The second time, he brought salve. "For the cuts," he said quietly, "from the last hunting lesson." I didn't move, didn't acknowledge him. He set the jar on a rock where I could reach it and left. The third time, he brought food. Not ash bread, real food. The kind warriors ate, venison wrapped in clean cloth. Still warm. "I'm sorry," he said. 2 words. Utterly inadequate for everything he'd been complicit in. For throwing the stone that killed father. For forcing me to serve as a living platter. For being George's son and learning all the wrong lessons. But also he'd been a child. 12 years old when they forced him to choose between killing my father or dying himself. 16 when they made him watch me be used as furniture. He'd been trapped in his own kind of mud. Maybe not as deep as mine, but still drowning. I shifted to human form. Sat on the bank in my threadbare dress. Didn't look at him. "Why are you here?" I asked. "Because I can't stop seeing you," he said. "Not you physically. The idea of you. What was done to you. What I did to you. It's in my head every time I close my eyes. Good. You should suffer. I know, I do. But suffering doesn't change anything. Doesn't help you. So I thought," he gestured helplessly at the food, "maybe this could. You think a piece of meat erases what you did? No, nothing erases it. But maybe it's a start. Maybe we can be something other than what they made us." I finally looked at him. He'd grown into his father's features. Same hard jaw, same sharp eyes. but there was something different in his expression, something broken that George had never had. Empathy, maybe? Or shame? Or the slow realization that being raised by monsters made you complicit in monstrosity. "What do you want from me, Gregory?" "Nothing. Everything. I don't know." He ran a hand through his hair. I want to believe we're not all like him, that we can be better, that maybe you and I could build something that isn't drowning in blood and shame." "You want redemption." "I want out," he corrected. "Out of this pack, this hierarchy, this whole sick system. I've been reading, Allison. Books my father doesn't know I have. About human cities, about laws that apply to everyone, about societies where prominence isn't determined by who your parents were or how hard you can bite." He looked at me with desperate intensity. "Come with me, when I'm old enough to leave without being hunted. Come with me to Stonehaven. We'll start over. Anonymous. Equal. We'll build lives that aren't buried in mud." It was insane. It was impossible. It was the first time anyone had ever suggested I could be something other than Cinderpaw. "Why me?" I asked. "Because you have a storm in your eyes," he said. "Not a broken one, a gathering one. And when it breaks, when you finally stop swallowing the rage, I want to be far away from here." He smiled, but it was sad. "Or maybe I want to be right beside you, helping you aim." We met at the creek every few days after that. Secretly, carefully, knowing that if George found out, we'd both end up at the Standing Stone. Gregory brought books, food, medicine for my twisted leg that made it hurt less when I shifted. But mostly, he brought a future. He'd planned everything, saved money from his warrior stipend, identified transport that ran to the human cities, found contacts who could help us establish identities. "We leave in 3 months," he said one evening. "On the new moon, when the pack is distracted by the hunting rite." "And your father?" "Will survive without me. Or he won't. Either way, I'm done being his legacy." For the first time in 11 years, since Father's skull cracked by the Standing Stone, I felt something other than cold rage. Hope, fragile, dangerous, easily crushed, but real. Chapter 6. The Night. Everything ended. Age 16, the new moon. The night we were supposed to leave, I waited at the creek with my pathetic bundle of possessions. One threadbare dress, Father's old knife he'd used for gutting fish, the water-damaged book I'd read 1,000 times. That was it. That was everything I owned that mattered. I sat on our usual boulder, watching the moon, just a sliver in the sky, and imagined walking into Stonehaven with Gregory beside me, finding work. Any work. Even cleaning human houses would be better than ash bread and living platters. Building something. A life. A future. Being Allison. Just Allison. Not Cinderpaw. Not broken blood. Just a person trying to matter. The hope was a physical ache in my chest. Then I saw the torchlight. Multiple torches. Coming through the trees toward the creek. I knew before they emerged what was happening. We'd been discovered. Alpha George led them, 8 warriors behind him, and Gregory, collared, not metaphorically. They'd put an actual collar around his neck, thick leather with silver studs that burned shifter skin, the kind used on prisoners, on rogues, on wolves who'd tried to run. Gregory's face was bruised, bloody. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Your corruption of my heir ends now," George said. His voice was calm, which was worse than rage. Rage meant emotion. Meant you could possibly reason or plead or negotiate. Calm meant he'd already decided, already judged, already planned exactly how this would end. "You have poisoned his mind," George continued, walking closer. "Filled his head with your broken blood delusions. Made him think he could abandon his duty, his pack, his blood." I started. The backhand sent me to the ground. My vision whited out. When it cleared, I could taste blood. You don't speak unless commanded, George said. You don't think unless permitted. You are nothing. You have always been nothing. And my son finally understands that. He turned to Gregory. Don't you, pup? Gregory's silence was answer enough. George pulled something from his belt, a thick leather strap, silver-tipped, braided with wire that would tear skin. The Omega whip, reserved for dogs that bit their masters, for wolves who forgot their place, for people like me. Your corruption ends now, George said. Your poisonous dreams end now. Your very existence as anything other than what you are ends now. He looked at his warriors. Hold her. 2 of them grabbed me, forced me to my knees in the frozen mud of my sanctuary. The one place that had been mine. The one place that had been clean. Now sullied by their presence. By what was about to happen. George handed the whip to Gregory. Renounce her, the Alpha commanded. Break her. Show me you understand what she is. Show me you're ready to be my heir. Gregory stared at the whip like it was a venomous snake. Father, please. She's a corruption, George interrupted. A disease. A broken thing that doesn't understand it's broken. And you've let her infect you with her delusions. He stepped closer to his son. So now you choose. You break her, properly, publicly. Make her understand her place. Or I break both of you, and then I find a new heir. One who understands that mercy is weakness. I watched Gregory's face, saw the war playing out behind his eyes, saw him look at me, at his father, at the warriors watching, at the whip in his shaking hands, saw him choose. Kneel, Allison of the Mud, he said. His voice was hollow, empty, like something had died behind his eyes. I was already kneeling, but I understood what he meant. Lower my head, accept what was coming, submit. So I did, not because I wanted to, because I wanted to live. The first lash tore through my dress and skin in one motion. I'd been hurt before. The hunting lessons, the twisted leg, the daily small cruelties. But this was different. This was systematic destruction. The whip's silver tips burned like fire where they split skin. Each strike carefully placed to maximize pain without killing. Professional. Gregory knew what he was doing. His father had trained him well. Howl, submission, George commanded. Make her howl. Another strike, across my shoulders. Another, across my spine. Another, across my ribs. I locked my jaw, swallowed the screams, tasted blood where I'd bitten through my tongue. I would not give them my voice. It was the only thing left that was mine. My silence was my last dignity. The beating continued. I lost count after 20, 30, maybe 40, each strike erasing something, erasing the hope I'd felt an hour ago, erasing the future Gregory had promised, erasing the stupid, naive girl who'd believed escape was possible. When it finally stopped, I was lying face down in the mud. My back was fire. My dress was shredded. I could feel blood pooling beneath me. But I hadn't howled, hadn't begged, hadn't given them satisfaction. Your final lesson, son. George's voice seemed to come from very far away. I tried to focus, tried to understand what he was saying. The mudblood is not a she-wolf. She is a thing, and things can be claimed, marked, owned. Understanding penetrated through the pain. The claiming bite, usually reserved for mates, a mark of bond, of choice, but it could also be used as property marker. Prisoners of war got it, rogues who'd been captured, wolves who'd lost everything including the right to be considered people. It scarred, permanently. Everyone who saw it would know what you were. Less than wolf, less than person. Thing. Do it, George commanded. Claim her as property. Show me you understand what she is. I felt Gregory kneel beside me, felt his breath on my neck, felt his teeth, sharp canines meant for tearing meat, rest against my jugular. "I'm sorry," he whispered. So quiet only I could hear. "I'm so fucking sorry." Then he bit down. The pain there's no adequate description. It wasn't just physical, wasn't just the tearing of flesh and the marking of bone. It was spiritual. Every wolf knows what the claiming bite feels like when it's done right, when it's chosen, when two wolves decide to mark each other as eternal partners. This was the opposite. This was violation. This was having your soul branded with ownership. This was learning that everything you thought you were could be taken. And the worst part? The part that broke something fundamental inside me? Gregory hesitated halfway through. I felt it. Felt him try to stop. Felt him start to pull back. Then I felt George's hand on his son's head, forcing him down, making him finish. "Complete it," the Alpha commanded. "Or I will. And then I'll do the same to you." So Gregory completed it, tore through the last layer of skin, marked me permanently as thing, as less, as owned. When he pulled back, I heard him vomiting, heard him sobbing. But it was done. The claiming bite scar would never fade. Everyone who saw it would know. Broken blood, mud dweller, property. George surveyed his work with satisfaction. "There," he said. "Now she understands. Now you both understand. This is the order. This is how things are. This is how they will always be." He turned to his warriors. "Leave her. The creek can wash away the blood, or she can drown. Either way, the lesson is complete." They left. All of them. Even Gregory, who looked back once with eyes that held nothing but horror and shame. But he still left. I lay in the mud of my sanctuary for a long time, bleeding, broken, marked, listening to the creek flow over stones, clean water inches from my face, and I felt something inside me shift. Not break. It was already broken. Transform. The gathering storm Gregory had seen in my eyes didn't just gather. It crystallized, became something cold and hard and patient. The rage I'd been swallowing for 11 years turned to ice in my chest. And ice, I understood now, was stronger than fire. Ice was patient, was methodical, was inevitable. Ice didn't explode and burn out. Ice crept, spread, waited for the perfect moment to crack foundations. My broken heart didn't go cold. It flash froze everything around it. I don't know how long I lay there. Could have been minutes. Could have been hours. Eventually, I made myself move, made myself crawl to the creek, made myself wash the blood away in water that turned pink around me. The claiming bite throbbed on my neck, would throb for weeks, would scar forever. But when I looked at my reflection in the creek, my eyes weren't the same. They'd always been gray, unremarkable. Now they held something else, a light, silver and cold and utterly inhuman, like moonlight on ice, like winter given consciousness. I tried to stand. My twisted leg wouldn't support me. Too much damage from the beating. So I shifted. And that's when I discovered what had happened. My wolf wasn't broken anymore. The shift came not as explosion, but as silent, terrible revelation. Where there had been a stunted, patchy creature with twisted limb, now stood something else entirely. Sleek, powerful, silver gray like storm clouds. The twisted leg was straight, strong, perfect. The patchy fur was thick and lustrous. My wolf was beautiful. Not in the way show dogs are beautiful, in the way glaciers are beautiful. Cold, deadly, ancient. I looked down at my reflection in the creek. My wolf's eyes glowed with that same silver moonlight. And I understood. The humiliation hadn't broken me. It had forged me. Every beating, every mocking word, every moment of being treated as less than nothing. It had been pressure. And pressure, given enough time and intensity, creates diamonds. Or in my case, something harder. I lifted my muzzle to the moon, just a sliver, the same moon that had been shining when they destroyed my hope, and I howled. Not the submission howl they'd tried to force from me, a promise, silent, internal, a vow written in pain and sealed with cold rage. I would survive. I would grow strong. I would learn their systems, their laws, their weaknesses. And then I would make them all kneel the way they'd made me kneel. Not through violence, through something worse, through becoming indispensable, invaluable, undeniable. I would rise so high, they'd have no choice but to acknowledge me. And when they did, when they finally looked at me with respect instead of disgust, I'd show them exactly what they'd created when they tried to break Allison of the mud. I ran that night, not away, never away, toward the human city where wolves could hide in plain sight, toward education and law and power that didn't depend on who your father was, toward a future I'd build from the ground up, with my twisted leg now straight, with my broken wolf now perfect, with my gathering storm now fully formed. I was 16 years old, and I had just become dangerous. Part Tobias, the Architect of Consequence. Chapter 7, Stonehaven. Age 16, the first week. I arrived in Stonehaven with nothing but a stolen name and a body that still bled. The dead girl's identity, Allison Vance, felt like a borrowed skin. I spent my first night shivering under a bridge, clutching father's gutting knife, listening to city sounds that were nothing like the forest. On the third day, I found the boarding house. On the fifth, I got the cleaning job. On the seventh, I allowed myself to believe I might survive. The purpose was simpler. Never kneel again. Stonehaven was overwhelming at first. 300,000 humans and shifters living on top of each other. Concrete instead of forest. Sirens instead of howls. The smell of exhaust and food and too many bodies in too small a space. But also it was clean. Not literally. The streets were filthy. The air was polluted. But the systems were clean. In Stonehaven, your last name didn't determine your future. Your bloodline didn't dictate your worth. You could be anyone. Build anything. Rise as high as your intelligence and determination could take you. For the first time in my life, I wasn't Cinderpaw. I was just Allison. And Allison was going to become someone they couldn't ignore. Age 17, first year. I lived in the cheapest place I could find, a boarding house in the industrial district where the night shift workers slept during the day. Shared bathroom, shared kitchen, cockroaches that barely bothered to hide. But it was mine. I worked 3 jobs. Morning, cleaning offices downtown before the business day started. Afternoon, stocking shelves at a grocery store. Night, waitressing at a diner that served the graveyard crowd. 16 hours a day, every day. The rest I spent in the public library, reading everything: employment law, contract law, tort law, constitutional law. I read cases, precedents, judicial opinions. I read about systems, how they were built, how they functioned, how they could be exploited or reformed. I read about wolves who'd risen from nothing, humans who'd changed entire industries, movements that had toppled governments. I absorbed it all like a starving animal absorbs food, because I understood something the pack had never understood. Violence was temporary, but systems were forever. If you wanted to change the world, you didn't challenge the Alpha to single combat. You rewrote the laws that made Alphas possible. I applied to Stonehaven University with my stolen identity and a personal essay about overcoming adversity. I didn't lie. Much. Just changed the specifics. Made my pack history vague. Made the abuse sound like generic poverty. Made my escape seem like ambition instead of desperation. They accepted me with a full scholarship. Not because I was special, because I'd scored in the 99th percentile on every entrance exam, and my essay made the admissions counselor cry. "You're going to do great things," she said, handing me my acceptance letter. I didn't correct her. just thanked her politely and left before she could see my expression. Because great things wasn't the goal. Necessary things was the goal. University was where I learned to weaponize empathy, not the soft kind, the strategic kind. I studied how people made decisions, what motivated them, what scared them, what they valued more than money or status. I learned that everyone, alpha or omega, human or shifter, had pressure points, places where you could push and make them do exactly what you wanted without them even realizing they'd been manipulated. I learned to read body language like text, micro-expressions, vocal inflections, the tiny tells that revealed what people really thought versus what they said. I learned to mirror, to make people feel comfortable, to become whoever they needed me to be in any given moment. Not because I was a chameleon, because I was a tool, and tools adapt to the job. My professors noticed. "You have a gift for reading people," my negotiations professor said, after I'd successfully argued both sides of a hostage situation in a mock trial. "Have you considered criminal psychology?" "I'm thinking employment law," I said. "That's unusual. Most students with your test scores aim for corporate or constitutional law. More prestigious, better money." "I don't care about prestige." "Then what do you care about?" I looked at him. This tenured professor with his comfortable office and his published books and his complete ignorance of what it meant to be property. "Leverage," I said. "Age 20, law school. I graduated undergrad in 3 years instead of 4. Took summer classes, overloaded every semester, tested out of prerequisites. Not because I loved learning. Because every day I wasn't practicing law was another day wolves like me were being broken. I got into Stonehaven Law with another scholarship, another essay about overcoming adversity. This time I wrote about the justice system's failure to protect vulnerable populations. Included statistics about workplace discrimination, wage theft, unsafe conditions, made it academic, professional, completely divorced from personal experience. They ate it up. "You're going to be a hell of an attorney," the dean said at my acceptance interview. "That's the plan," I said. Law school was where I discovered my true weapon. Not physical strength, not even intelligence. Pattern recognition. The ability to see systems, not just how they claimed to work, but how they actually worked. Where the gaps were, where the protections failed, where vulnerable people fell through cracks that shouldn't exist. I saw employment law the way a predator sees prey. Every weak point, every vulnerability, every place you could apply pressure and bring the whole structure down. Employers thought they were protected by corporate veils and arbitration clauses and at-will employment statutes. They weren't. They were exposed, fragile, one good lawsuit away from catastrophic liability, and I was going to show them exactly how exposed they were. Chapter 8, The First Case Age. 23, Attorney at Law. I passed the bar on my first attempt with one of the highest scores in the state. Got recruited by 3 different firms, turned them all down. Instead, I opened my own practice. Allison Vance, Attorney at Law. One cramped office above a dry cleaner, second-hand furniture, a phone that rang maybe twice a week. But it was mine, and I was ready. My first client was a cleaning woman named Maria, 53 years old, human, spoke broken English, had been working for a corporate office building for 12 years. They'd just fired her, not officially fired, just stopped putting her on the schedule, claimed budget cuts, but they'd hired her replacement, a younger woman who'd work for less money, the same week. Maria came to my office with her termination letter and tears streaming down her face. "They say I too old," she said. "Say I too slow, but I work hard. I always work hard." I read the termination letter, read her employment contract, read the company handbook, found exactly what I was looking for. 3 violations of state employment law, 2 violations of federal law, 1 violation of the company's own written policies. "Maria," I said, "do you want your job back, or do you want to make them pay?" She hesitated. "I want them to not do this to someone else." "Perfect. Then let's build a class action. I spent 6 months building that case, found 18 other cleaning staff who'd been terminated the same way. All women, all over 40, all replaced with younger, cheaper labor. Pattern and practice discrimination. Age discrimination. Wrongful termination. The kind of case that makes companies panic. Because it wasn't about one employee. It was about a system. And systems, once exposed, can't be hidden again. The company's lawyers were from a big downtown firm. 3 attorneys in $1,000 suits who treated me like a child playing dress-up. "Ms. Vance," the lead attorney said during our first settlement conference, "you're young, you're inexperienced. This is your first case. Why don't we save everyone time and money? We'll offer your clients 2 weeks severance. They sign NDAs. Everyone moves on." "Counteroffer," I said. "You pay full back wages for all 18 plaintiffs. You reinstate those who want their jobs back. You implement new hiring policies with independent oversight. And you donate $50,000 to a workforce development program for displaced older workers." He laughed. Actually laughed. "Or what? You'll take us to trial? You think a jury will side with cleaning ladies over a major corporation?" "Yes," I said, "because I have documents, emails from your HR director explicitly stating they wanted to refresh the cleaning staff with younger faces. I have testimony from the hiring manager admitting she was told to pass over older applicants. I have statistical analysis showing a clear pattern of age-based termination. And I have 18 sympathetic plaintiffs who'll testify about working 12 years with perfect performance reviews until they suddenly became too slow." I leaned forward. "But more importantly, I have local news outlets who are very interested in this story. Because it turns out people care when corporations systematically discriminate against grandmothers. It's bad for business, bad for recruitment, bad for stock prices." The smile disappeared from his face. "You wouldn't." "Try me." They settled. Not for my full demand, but close enough. Back wages, reinstatement for those who wanted it, policy changes, $25,000 to the workforce program, and no NDA. That was my condition, because I wanted this case public, wanted other attorneys to see it was possible, wanted other workers to know they had options, wanted corporations to understand that abusing low-wage workers had consequences. Maria hugged me when I delivered her settlement check. "You give me back my dignity," she said. I didn't correct her, didn't explain that dignity couldn't be given or taken, only recognized or denied. Just accepted the hug and thought about Father, about kneeling in mud, about being used as a living platter, about every moment I'd been told I was worthless. This was the beginning of making them pay. Not them specifically, but every system that created them, every hierarchy that enabled them, every structure that said some people matter more than others. I was going to dismantle it all, one case at a time, with patience, with precision, with the cold, methodical fury of someone who'd learned exactly how to use the law as a weapon. Chapter 9, Building the Practice Age. 24 to 27, the pattern continues. Maria's case made me known. Not famous, but known. The kind of known that matters. Workers' rights advocates started referring clients to me. Legal aid societies asked me to speak. Other young attorneys wanted to know how I'd beaten a major corporation. I didn't tell them the truth, that I'd beaten them because I understood how predators think, because I'd spent my childhood learning to anticipate violence, because I could read the fear under bluster the way other people read street signs. Instead, I gave them the professional answer: preparation, documentation, willingness to go to trial. They nodded and took notes like I'd revealed some secret. My practice grew. Not explosively, steadily. I took cases no one else wanted, the complicated ones, the small ones, the ones where the client couldn't pay up front. Janitors who'd been injured and denied workers' comp. Warehouse workers who'd been misclassified as contractors. Restaurant staff who'd been stiffed on overtime. The invisible people who kept the city running and got nothing but exploitation in return. I worked contingency, took a percentage of settlements instead of hourly fees, which meant I had to win. Had to extract maximum value from every case. Had to be relentless. Good. Relentless was my natural state. Age 25. The warehouse case. The case that changed everything came when I was 25. A logistics company, Titan Distribution, operated a massive warehouse on the edge of Stonehaven. Employed 300 workers, mostly shifters, mostly low-status pack members or rogues. They'd been systematically misclassifying employees as independent contractors, which meant no benefits, no overtime, no workers' comp, no unemployment insurance, just hourly pay that barely covered rent and the constant threat of being released from contract if you complained. I got the case when one worker, a young beta named Bernard, came to my office with a broken arm from a forklift accident. They said it was my fault, he explained. Said since I'm a contractor, I should have my own insurance, should have been more careful. Then they terminated my contract. So they injured you, blamed you, and fired you? Yeah. And I can't afford a doctor, can't afford rent, can't afford anything. He looked at me with desperate eyes. I heard you help people like me. People like you? Wolves who got nothing, who nobody cares about. I thought about Cinderpaw, about Ashbread, about all the years of being nobody. I care, I said. Let's destroy them. Building that case took 8 months. I didn't just sue for Bernard. I built another class action, found 47 other workers who'd been misclassified, injured, and terminated. Documented the pattern, calculated the back wages, benefits, and damages. Showed that Titan had saved millions by treating employees as contractors. And I found the smoking gun. An email from Titan's CFO to the operations manager. Contractor status saves us approximately $3.2 million annually in benefits and insurance costs. Maintain current classification regardless of job duties. If any workers threaten legal action, terminate immediately. Better to replace them than risk reclassification audit. It was beautiful, not morally, legally. They'd admitted in writing to systematic fraud. Admitted they knew it was illegal. Admitted they'd retaliate against anyone who complained. It was everything I needed. Titan's attorneys tried every trick. Delay tactics, discovery disputes, motions to dismiss, attempts to force arbitration. I fought every motion, appealed every adverse ruling, made it as expensive and public as possible. And I leaked. Not to general media, to industry publications, trade magazines, union newsletters. Let the logistics industry know exactly what Titan was doing. Let other workers know they weren't alone. Let other attorneys know there was money in these cases if you were willing to fight. The case settled on the courthouse steps, literally the morning of trial. After 2 years of litigation, $8 million, split between 47 plaintiffs minus my contingency fee. It wasn't fair. Nothing could be fair for workers who'd lost years of benefits, years of security, years of stability. But it was something. And more importantly, it sent a message. Exploit low-wage workers, and there will be consequences. Not criminal prosecution. The system didn't work that way for corporations. But financial consequences. Public consequences. The kind that make boards of directors nervous. Bernard came to my office when his settlement check cleared. "This is more money than I've ever had," he said, staring at the check. "I can fix my arm, get proper treatment, maybe go back to school. Good. You deserve that." "Why do you do this?" he asked suddenly. "You could work for a big firm, make way more money, but you take cases like mine. Cases nobody else wants. Why?" I thought about telling him the truth, that I'd been property once, that I'd been marked as less than wolf, that I'd made a promise in frozen mud to make them pay. But that would have been unprofessional, so I gave him the answer attorneys are supposed to give. Because someone has to. Chapter 10. The Ethelred offer, age 27, the seduction of power. The Titan case made me impossible to ignore. I'd taken down a major corporation, exposed systematic exploitation, generated 8 figures in damages. I was exactly the kind of attorney powerful people wanted on their side. That's when the Ethelred Pack contacted me. I'd heard of them, of course. Everyone in Stonehaven had. The Ethelred were what you got when ancient wolf bloodlines met modern capitalism. They weren't like Greyridge, brutish and simple, and ruling through intimidation. They were sophisticated, integrated, invisible. They owned real estate across the city, controlled major financial institutions, had members on every important board and committee. They were power, real power, the kind that didn't need to roar because everyone already knew to be quiet. Liam Ethelred came to my office on a Tuesday afternoon. He was not what I expected. 32 years old, sharp dresser, confident without being arrogant. He carried himself like someone who'd never been told no and didn't need to threaten people to get his way. "Ms. Vance," he said, extending his hand. "I've been following your work. Impressive." "Thank you. What can I do for you?" "I want to hire you." "I don't do corporate defense. I'm not asking you to defend anything. I want you to reform my pack." That got my attention. He explained over coffee at a place expensive enough that I'd never eaten there. The Ethelred Pack was ancient, powerful, rich, but it was also ossified, stuck in hierarchies and traditions that made no sense in the modern world. "My father runs the pack like it's still the 15th century, Liam said. "Bloodline determines everything. Alphas give orders, Omegas obey. Anyone who questions gets ostracized." Sounds familiar. I'm sure it does, but it's also stupid. We're wasting talent, driving away good wolves because they were born Beta or Omega, making enemies when we should be building alliances. He leaned forward. "I've been researching you, Allison. Not just your cases, your background. I know you came from nothing. Built this practice from scratch. You understand how hierarchies really work. Not the pleasant fiction we tell ourselves, but the brutal mechanics underneath. And what do you want me to do with that understanding? Help me reform the Ethelred, write new pack laws based on merit instead of bloodline, create accountability systems, build structures that protect vulnerable pack members." He smiled. "Help me build the pack we should be. And in return, you get resources, political backing, and a platform to change how every pack in this region operates." It was seductive. Not Liam himself, though he was attractive enough. The offer. A chance to take everything I'd learned in 7 years of practicing law and apply it at scale. Not one case at a time. One pack at a time. And the Ethelred were influential enough that if they reformed, others would follow. This was the prominence I'd promised myself. Not standing on top of others, but changing the system that created the top in the first place. "I need to think about it," I said. "Of course." "But Allison..." He placed his business card on the table between us. "I think you're exactly what we need. Someone who understands the cost of the old ways. Someone who's willing to fight for something better." I thought about it for 3 days. Thought about Father at the Standing Stone. Thought about serving as a living platter. Thought about the claiming bite scar I still carried on my neck. Thought about every case I'd won, and how none of them changed the fundamental structure. Corporations kept exploiting workers. Just more carefully. Packs kept abusing low-status members. Just less publicly. The system remained. Unless someone had the leverage and resources to change it systemically. Unless someone had access to real power and the will to use it correctly. On the 4th day, I called Liam. "I'll do it, with conditions." "Name them." "First, I maintain my practice. The work I do for your pack doesn't prevent me from taking other cases." "Agreed." "Second, any laws I write apply to everyone. No exceptions for bloodline or status. If I'm building something new, it's actually new." "Agreed." "Third, if your father or the old guard tries to sabotage this, I walk, and I take every document, every plan, and every reform proposal public. Make your pack look like exactly what it is. Silence on the other end. Then, "You drive a hard bargain. I learned from the best teachers, people who tried to break me. Did they succeed? Yes, but not the way they intended. Are we agreed? We're agreed." I became the Ethelred Pack's chief legal strategist the following week. It came with an office in their headquarters, a staff, a budget. Most importantly, it came with access to the Pack's internal documents, decision-making processes, power structures, to everything I needed to dismantle them from the inside, not destroy them. That would be pointless. Transform them into something that couldn't create more cinderpaws, into a model that protected the vulnerable instead of exploiting them, into proof that wolves could be better than their instincts. The first 6 months were extraordinary. Liam wasn't just talk. He genuinely wanted reform. We worked 12-hour days drafting new pack covenants, creating accountability systems, designing structures that distributed power instead of concentrating it. I established the first Stone Fund, named very deliberately, to support displaced and low-status pack members. Education grants, job training, emergency housing. Everything I'd needed and never had. I created an ombudsman system where pack members could report abuse without fear of retaliation. I rewrote promotion policies to emphasize merit over bloodline. And slowly, painfully, the Ethelred began to change. Omegas who'd been excluded from leadership positions got appointed to key roles. Betas who'd been overlooked got recognized for their contributions. The rigid hierarchy loosened just enough to let competence rise. It was working. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving or winning individual battles. I was building something. Liam and I grew close during those months. Not romantically at first, professionally. He was brilliant in ways I hadn't expected. Strategic, patient, willing to fight his own father for what he believed was right. We'd work late into the night, arguing about policy details, finding compromises that preserved both tradition and progress. And somewhere in those late nights, professional respect became something else. Became attraction. Became connection. Became the slow realization that we worked, not just as colleagues, as partners. "I've never met anyone like you," he said one night after we'd finalized a particularly complex reform package. "You're relentless, uncompromising. But also, you actually care. About the outcome, about the people affected. Most attorneys just care about winning. I care about winning too, just not for myself." "Then who?" I thought about answering honestly, about telling him about Cinderpaw and Ashbread and the Standing Stone, but I wasn't ready yet, so I deflected. "For everyone who's been told they don't matter, that they're too small, too weak, too broken, they matter, and I'm going to prove it." He kissed me then, soft, careful, asking permission. I let him, because maybe this was what winning looked like. Not revenge, not destruction. Building something with someone who saw me clearly and chose me anyway. Maybe prominence didn't mean standing alone. Maybe it meant having a partner who respected your strength instead of fearing it. Maybe I could have both. The reforms and the relationship. The mission and the man. Maybe I could finally stop being nothing but a weapon and become a person again. I was wrong, but I didn't know that yet. Part 3. The Breaking of the Architect. Chapter 11. The Old Guard Strikes. Age 28. The Sabotage. The sabotage was elegant. That's what made it so devastating. If they'd attacked me directly, physically or politically, I could have fought back. But they didn't attack me. They attacked my work. It started with my landmark case. I was representing a class of shifter workers against a major corporation, Hexen Industries, for discriminatory practices. They'd been systematically passing over shifters for promotion while advancing humans with identical qualifications. Classic employment discrimination. I had everything. Documents, testimony, statistical analysis showing a clear pattern. The case was airtight, set to go to trial in 3 weeks. Victory would have meant millions in damages and a legal precedent that protected shifters across the state. Then my lead plaintiff recanted. Bernard, not the warehouse Bernard, a different one, called me on a Tuesday morning. "I can't do this anymore," he said. His voice was strange, flat. "Can't do what?" "The case. I'm withdrawing. I was wrong about what happened. They didn't discriminate. I wasn't as qualified as I thought." "Bernard, that's not what you said in your deposition. You had performance reviews showing you were more qualified than—" "I was wrong. I'm withdrawing. I've already signed a statement." He hung up. When I called back, the number was disconnected. I found him 3 days later. He was living in a new apartment. Nice building. Way nicer than he should have been able to afford on his salary. "How much did they pay you?" I asked when he finally let me in. "I don't know what you're talking about." "To recant. To withdraw from the case." "How much?" He wouldn't meet my eyes. 50,000. And a promotion. And a promise they wouldn't fire me. "Bernard, they discriminated against you, against dozens of others. That doesn't change just because—" "I have a daughter," he interrupted. "She's 6. She needs stability. I can't risk my job fighting a corporation that will destroy me just to make a point. This isn't just a point, it's over." He finally looked at me. "I'm sorry. I know what this means for your case, but I have to choose my family. You'd understand that if you had anyone who depended on you." The words hit harder than he probably intended, because he was right. I didn't have anyone who depended on me. I had work, mission, purpose, but no family, no relationships outside the professional. I'd built my entire life around a crusade and forgotten to build a life. Without Bernard's testimony, the case collapsed. The other plaintiffs got nervous, started withdrawing too. Within a week, I'd gone from airtight victory to catastrophic loss. The court dismissed the case. Hexen Industries issued a press release declaring complete vindication, and I was left with nothing. The hit pieces started appearing the following week, not in mainstream news, in industry publications, legal blogs, PAC newsletters, articles questioning my methods, suggesting I'd coerced plaintiffs into fraudulent claims, implying I was more interested in headlines than justice. Young attorney's crusade ends in embarrassment. Discrimination case falls apart under scrutiny. Allison Vance, zealot or fraud? It was coordinated, professional, designed to destroy my reputation without leaving fingerprints. I knew who was behind it. The same old guard who'd opposed my Ethelred reforms from the beginning. They couldn't attack me directly, because Liam protected me. But they could attack my work, my credibility, my ability to be effective. And they could do it in ways that looked like natural consequences of overreach instead of deliberate sabotage. The first Stone Fund was next. Someone, I never proved who, filed a complaint with the State Charity Commission. Alleged that I was embezzling funds, that the emergency housing payments were going to shell companies I controlled, that the whole operation was a front for money laundering. It was absurd, easily disproven, but it didn't matter. The investigation alone was enough. Donors pulled out. Grant applications were denied. Recipients stopped applying because they didn't want to be associated with a scandal. Within 3 months, the fund was dead. Not because it had done anything wrong, because the appearance of impropriety was enough to kill it. I sat in my office, the nice one at Ethelred headquarters, not the cramped one above the dry cleaner, and looked at everything I'd built. The new PAC covenants that protected vulnerable members, the ombudsman system that let people report abuse, the merit-based promotion policies, all of it under attack, all of it being slowly dismantled by wolves who understood exactly how to weaponize procedure and process and plausible deniability. They didn't need to fight me openly. They just needed to make everything I touched fail. And they were succeeding. Chapter 12. The Compromise. 3 months later. Liam found me working late one Thursday night. I was reviewing discovery documents for a new case, trying to rebuild my practice after the Hexen disaster, when he knocked on my open door. "We need to talk," he said. His tone made my stomach clench. "About?" "About the reforms. About your position here. About us. He came in and closed the door. Sat across from my desk like we were negotiating a settlement instead of talking about our relationship. My father's faction is growing stronger, Liam said. The old guard. They've been making moves, building coalitions, threatening to call for a leadership challenge. Let them. You're the rightful alpha. Rightful doesn't matter if I can't maintain support. And right now I'm losing support because of... He stopped himself. Because of me, I finished. Because of the reforms I've been pushing. Because I'm making the comfortable uncomfortable. Yes. The word hung there. Simple. Honest. Devastating. What are you asking me to do? I said quietly. Pause, just temporarily. Let things settle. Let the old guard feel like they've won something. Then in a year or two, we can restart the reforms. More gradually. More carefully. You want me to be less visible. I want us to be strategic, to recognize that sometimes you have to retreat to advance. I stared at him. This man I'd been sleeping with for 6 months. This man I'd thought understood what I was trying to build. This man who'd promised we'd change things together. And I saw it. The same calculation I'd seen in Gregory's eyes by the creek. The same moment of choice between standing with me and protecting himself. You're asking me to kneel, I said. I'm asking you to be pragmatic. That's the same thing. Allison, please. I love you. But I'm also responsible for an entire pack. I can't let everything fall apart just to protect me? Just to keep your promises? Just to actually be different than your father? That's not fair. Neither is asking me to undo 2 years of work because you're afraid of conflict. We stared at each other across the desk. Is this an ultimatum? He asked finally. Me or the reforms? No, it's a question. Do you actually want to build something better? Or do you just want to feel like you're better while maintaining the same broken system? He didn't answer immediately. That silence told me everything. I need time to think, he said finally. About how to navigate this. About what's best for the pack. Take all the time you need, I said. But I already knew. He'd made his choice. He chose pragmatism over principle, safety over righteousness, his position over our partnership. Just like Gregory had chosen his father's approval over escaping to freedom. Just like everyone eventually chose the comfort of the known over the risk of the better. I'd been a fool to think Liam was different. Chapter 13. The Conclave. 2 weeks later. The Ethelred Conclave met to vote on the reform package. All senior pack members, all decision-makers, all the wolves who'd benefit most from maintaining the old hierarchy. I knew before walking in that I'd lost. Liam had been distant since our conversation, avoiding my calls, sending subordinates with requests instead of coming himself. The writing was on the wall, but I showed up anyway, dressed professionally, prepared my materials, ready to make my case one final time. Maybe I could still change minds. Maybe logic and evidence and basic human decency would matter. Maybe this time would be different. The conclave chamber was intimidatingly beautiful. Old wood, stained glass windows, seats arranged in a semicircle like a Roman Senate. 73 senior pack members. Liam at the center in the alpha's seat. His father, Alaric, beside him in the traditional elder position. I stood in the center where advocates presented. Alone. Members of the conclave, I began. We're here to vote on the reform package that's been developed over the past 2 years. These reforms will... We know what they'll do, Alaric interrupted. His voice was cold, precise. They'll dismantle centuries of tradition, reward mediocrity over excellence, confusion, mercy with weakness. I forced myself to stay calm. With respect, Elder Alaric, these reforms don't reward mediocrity. They reward merit. They create accountability systems they empower the weak, he said. They elevate those who should serve to positions they haven't earned. They pretend that birth and bloodline don't matter when any wolf with sense knows they matter most. He stood, walked toward me with calculated menace. You want us to learn governance from a mud dweller. The word landed like a slap. How did he know? I'd been careful. My background was sealed. My identity was secure. Unless Liam had told him. In a moment of weakness or strategic calculation, he'd shared my history, given his father ammunition. I don't know what you mean, I said carefully. Don't you? Alaric smiled. Did you think we wouldn't investigate? That we'd accept some orphan attorney with a convenient sob story and no verifiable history? He pulled a folder from inside his jacket, placed it on the presenter's table. Your real name is Allison Greyridge. You were born in the lowest status family of one of the most brutal packs in the region. Your father was executed for poaching. You were marked as property, and you fled here to play at being important. My hands clenched. Stay calm. Stay professional. My background doesn't change the validity of these reforms. Your background proves you're unfit to advise us. You don't understand strength. You don't understand hierarchy. You understand bitterness and resentment, and the pathetic delusion that weakness deserves protection. He looked around the chamber. This wolf, this broken thing, wants to remake our pack in her image, wants to elevate mud dwellers and failures and anyone too pathetic to succeed under normal standards, wants to call it justice when it's really just revenge. These reforms aren't revenge, I said quietly. They're prevention. They're making sure no other child has to kneel in mud while what? While learning their place? While being taught that actions have consequences? While understanding that strength isn't given, it's earned? He turned back to me. You weren't oppressed, girl. You were corrected. And you're so bitter about that correction that you're trying to burn down every structure that could produce actual excellence. The chamber was silent. I could feel every pack member's eyes on me. Some looked uncomfortable. Some looked satisfied. Liam looked away. Couldn't even meet my eyes while his father destroyed me. I didn't try to defend myself. There was no point. Alaric hadn't been making an argument. He'd been performing, showing the conclave that I was other, that I was threat, that I was exactly what they'd been taught to fear. Someone from below trying to pull down those above. Instead, I did something else. I spoke the truth. You're right, I said clearly. I am from mud. I was marked as property. I was broken down in ways you comfortable wolves can't imagine. I let the words settle. But that's exactly why these reforms matter. Because I know, not theoretically, but intimately, what your system does to vulnerable pack members, how it destroys potential, how it wastes talent, how it creates enemies when it should create allies. I looked around the chamber. You call it strength. I call it stupidity. You're crushing your own people, driving away intelligence and dedication because you're too proud to recognize that birth doesn't determine worth. That hierarchy for its own sake is just elaborate cruelty. I turned to Alaric. I'm not trying to burn down excellence. I'm trying to build a system where excellence can emerge from anywhere, not just from the bloodlines that happened to win conflicts centuries ago. But you're right about one thing, I said. I'm not one of you. I'll never be one of you. I'm from mud, and mud is where things grow. I picked up my materials. Your polished stone fields are barren. You're not leaders. You're curators of a dying museum. And when the world changes, when the old ways finally collapse under their own brutality, don't say no one warned you. I turned to Liam. You wanted a tool to polish the relics. I'm a plowshare. I was built to turn the earth over. His face was pained, guilty, helpless. I'm sorry, he whispered. So quiet only I could hear. Not yet, I said. But you will be. Then I walked out, not defeated, not broken, sovereign of a different country than the one they ruled. Behind me, I heard the vote. 73 voices, 62 against my reforms, 11 in favor. The Ethelred would remain exactly what it had always been. A beautiful, sophisticated prison for anyone who didn't fit. I didn't look back. Part 4. Building from the Ashes. Chapter 14. The Docks. Age 29, starting over. I didn't go to the mountains. Didn't run to some remote wilderness to lick my wounds and rage at the moon. I went to the industrial docks, the low-rent districts where Stonehaven's forgotten wolves lived, where rogues and outcasts and pack rejects eked out existence in crumbling apartments and converted warehouses, where the mud dwellers congregated, my people. I still had my law practice, the cramped office above the dry cleaner, my second-hand furniture, my files full of cases the big firms wouldn't touch, but I had something else now, too. Clarity. For 2 years, I'd tried to reform from within, tried to convince people with power that they should share it, tried to build something better inside structures designed to concentrate authority. I'd been an idiot. You don't reform power structures by asking nicely. You build alternative structures that make the old ones obsolete. I started with a question. What do broken wolves need most? Not charity, not pity. Infrastructure, a way to pool resources, share skills, protect each other. A system that didn't require appealing to alpha benevolence. So I built one. The Hearthstead Collective. I used what remained of my savings, everything I'd made from the Titan settlement and hadn't spent on the first stone fund, to lease a warehouse in the docks district. 3,000 square feet of concrete and corrugated metal. $50,000 in renovations to make it livable. And a vision. Not a shelter. Not a charity. A cooperative. The structure was intentionally non-hierarchical. Every member got one vote in collective decisions. Every member contributed according to ability, skills, labor, or resources. Every member benefited according to need, housing, food, support, opportunity. No alphas, no ranked system. No one got to pull rank based on bloodline or dominance. Just wolves helping wolves. It was the exact opposite of everything I'd been raised under. The first members were obvious recruits. Maria, from my first case. Now in her late 50s, still cleaning offices, but with nowhere safe to retire. Bernard, from the warehouse case. Still struggling despite his settlement, unable to find stable work because word had spread he'd sued his employer. A young Omega named Teresa, who'd been exiled from Silvermoon Pack for refusing a forced mating. 19 years old, pregnant, terrified. An elderly healer named Ruth, who'd been cast out from Ironwood Pack when her arthritis made her useless. She knew more about shifter medicine than anyone I'd ever met. A tech-savvy rogue named Chris, who'd been banned from 3 different packs for insubordination, which meant he'd pointed out their cybersecurity was a joke. Broken wolves, failed wolves, forgotten wolves. All of them brilliant in ways the packs couldn't see. We started small. Maria taught cleaning skills to younger members who needed work. Showed them which buildings paid fairly, which managers would exploit them. Bernard used his logistics experience to create an informal messenger service. Faster and cheaper than the pack-run systems because we weren't weighed down by bureaucracy. Teresa, once she recovered from giving birth, had a gift for negotiation. She could talk building managers into reasonable rent, could find deals on bulk food, could extract favorable terms from anyone. Ruth set up a clinic in the converted warehouse, treated injuries and illnesses for members who couldn't afford pack healers, trained younger wolves in basic medical care. Chris built a website, created a database of safe employers, dangerous pack territories, available resources, built an encrypted communication system so we could coordinate without pack leadership monitoring, each person's strength compensating for another's weakness, each person valued for what they could do, not what they couldn't. Age 29, 6 months in. Word spread fast in the outcast community. Other rogues started showing up. Pack rejects. Wolves who'd been exiled, demoted, or just tired of living under someone's boot. By 6 months, we had 30 members. By a year, 50. By 18 months, 83. We weren't just surviving. We were thriving. The collective's impact wasn't dramatic, wasn't a single epic victory. It was 1,000 small changes. A young wolf from Grey Ridge, I didn't know her, but she knew my story, used our resources to start a messenger service that outcompeted the pack's runners. Faster, cheaper, more reliable, because we weren't constrained by hierarchy, weren't slowed by dominance posturing, weren't wasting time on pack politics. We just delivered messages. Ruth's clinic developed a better treatment for shift shock, the disorientation that hit young wolves during their first shift. The pack healers had been using the same technique for decades: sedation and restraint, treating it like a problem to be suppressed. Ruth treated it like a transition to be guided. Her method reduced shift shock trauma by 70%, helped young wolves integrate their human and animal sides instead of fighting them. Within a year, 3 different packs were quietly referring their troubled shifters to Ruth, paying for her services, implementing her protocols. They never acknowledged where the technique came from, but they used it. Chris's encrypted network became essential infrastructure for vulnerable wolves. Omegas in abusive pack situations could reach out for help without their alphas knowing. Rogues could find safe territories and avoid dangerous ones. Information flowed freely instead of being controlled by pack leadership. It was power, real power. Not the kind that came from biting harder or roaring louder, the kind that came from knowing things others didn't, from providing services people needed, from becoming indispensable. Age 30, the eviction attempt. The Ethelred pack tried to evict us in my 30th year. They claimed the docks were technically Ethelred territory, that we were occupying pack lands without permission. It was bullshit, and everyone knew it. The docks had been neutral ground for decades. No pack claimed them because they were industrial wasteland nobody wanted. But now, we'd built something there, made it valuable. So they wanted it back. Alaric Ethelred himself led the legal challenge, showed up to housing court with 3 attorneys from the firm that had opposed me in my early cases. I represented the collective alone. Your Honor, Alaric's attorney began, this is a simple matter of property rights. The Ethelred pack holds historical claim to these territories. The occupants are trespassing. We request immediate eviction. Your Honor, I countered, the Ethelred pack hasn't maintained, managed, or paid taxes on these territories in 40 years. They've allowed them to fall into disrepair. Under adverse possession doctrine, they've abandoned any legitimate claim. We never abandoned. You did nothing, I interrupted. While the collective renovated a dangerous warehouse into safe housing, while we cleaned up industrial waste, while we created jobs and infrastructure, you did nothing. And now that we've made it valuable, you want it back. I turned to face Alaric directly. This isn't about property rights. It's about silencing wolves who've learned they don't need you, who've built something that works better than your carefully controlled hierarchy. This is about law, Alaric said coldly. Something you should understand, being an attorney. I understand law perfectly. I also understand what this really is. I pulled out my phone, opened a news article I'd prepared for exactly this moment. I've been in contact with 3 major news outlets about this case. They're very interested in the story of a powerful pack trying to evict a cooperative that provides housing and healthcare to vulnerable wolves, especially since several of your own pack members have quietly been using our services. I turned back to the judge. Your Honor, if the Ethelred pack wants these territories, they'll have to prove legitimate claim. They'll have to justify why they ignored these lands for decades, but suddenly care now. And they'll have to explain why removing essential services for vulnerable populations serves any legitimate interest. The judge looked at Alaric's expensive attorneys, then at me, then at the packed courtroom full of collective members who'd shown up to watch. I'm denying the eviction request, he said. The Ethelred pack has failed to demonstrate active maintenance of these territories. The collective has established adverse possession through continuous improvement in occupation. Case dismissed. Alaric caught me in the hallway after the hearing. You think you've won something, he said quietly. You think building a little commune for failures makes you powerful. I don't think I'm powerful, I said. I know I'm necessary. That's better. You're a cancer, spreading the delusion that weakness deserves protection, that failure deserves second chances. that mud dwellers should be treated like they matter. They do matter. And one day, you'll need us. Your perfect hierarchy will crack. Your bloodlines will weaken. Your traditional ways will stop working. And when that happens, when you finally can't maintain the fiction of alpha superiority, we'll still be here, doing the work, providing the services, making sure vulnerable wolves survive. I stepped closer. You can't evict us from the docks. You can't evict us from the city. And you can't evict us from relevance. We're not going away, Alaric. We're just getting started. Chapter 15. The Supplicant. Age 32, 3 years after the conclave, Gregory came to the hearthstead on a rain-soaked Tuesday evening. I was in my office, a converted storage room on the second floor of the warehouse, reviewing legal documents when Teresa knocked on my open door. "Someone here to see you," she said. Her voice was strange. "Careful." "Who?" "Says his name is Gregory, from Greyridge Pack." Everything inside me went cold. "Tell him I'm not available." "I tried. He's been waiting outside for 3 hours, in the rain. He said," she hesitated, "he said to tell you he's not here as George's son. He's here as someone who needs help." I wanted to refuse, wanted to let him stand in the rain until hypothermia forced him to leave. But I'd built the collective on a principle. Vulnerable wolves deserved help. Even when they'd hurt you. Even when they'd broken you. Even when they carried the face of your nightmares. "Send him up," I said. Gregory was 32 now. Same age I was. But he looked older. Worn down by something I recognized. The weight of being complicit in cruelty while knowing better. He stood in my doorway, dripping rain onto the concrete floor, and I saw him as he really was. Not the alpha heir. Not George's successor. Just another damaged wolf trying to survive. "Allison," he said. "Thank you for seeing me. I haven't decided to see you yet. I've decided to listen. There's a difference. Talk." He came in, sat in the chair across from my desk without being invited. Old alpha habit, taking space without asking. But his body language wasn't dominant. It was defeated. "Greyridge is dying," he said. "Has been for years, losing members, losing territory, can't maintain infrastructure, can't attract new wolves. The young ones leave as soon as they're old enough. The old ways are starving us, and my father won't change. He'd rather watch everything collapse than admit the system is broken." "I know, I've been tracking it." His eyes widened. "You have?" "Of course. Greyridge creates a steady stream of refugees who end up here. Exiles, rejects, wolves who finally got tired of kneeling." I leaned back in my chair. "Why are you here, Gregory?" "My father is dying, cancer. He has maybe 6 months. And the pack. They're asking about you. The low-status families especially. They remember your story. They know you built something here. They want me to come back and save them." "Yes. No. Yes. No. Allison, please. I know what I did. I know I broke every promise. I know I hurt you in ways that can't be healed. But this isn't about me. It's about wolves who are suffering under a system you could change. You could reform Greyridge the way you tried to reform the Ethelred. I could waste my time trying to fix a pack that threw me away," I interrupted. "That made my father kneel before the standing stone? That used me as a living platter? That let you mark me as property?" I touched my neck. The claiming bite scar was still there, would always be there. "Why would I help them?" "Because they're not all complicit. The low-status families. The Omegas. The children who weren't born yet when you were hurt. They're trapped in the same system that broke you, and you have the power to free them." "I don't want to free them. I want them to free themselves." "How?" "They don't have your education, your resources, your strength. They need leadership." "Then find them a leader. Not me. You are their leader, whether you accept it or not. Your story is legendary among them. The girl who survived exile, who built power from nothing, who proves that mud dwellers can rise. You're already leading them. I'm just asking you to make it official." I stared at him. This man who'd whipped me by the creek, who'd bitten the property mark into my neck, who'd chosen his father over freedom. This man who'd been as trapped as I was. Just in a different kind of mud. "I'm not coming back to Grey Ridge," I said finally. "I'm not taking your pack's throne. I'm not interested in ruling wolves who need an alpha to tell them how to live." His face fell. "But," I continued, "I am interested in helping the wolves in the mud, the ones who want something better, the ones willing to work for it." I pulled out a notepad. "Send them here. The low-status families, the Omegas, the ones who are drowning in Grey Ridge's hierarchy. We have space, we have work, we have a system that doesn't require kneeling." "You're stealing my pack members." "I'm offering alternatives. If they choose to come, that's their decision. If they choose to stay and try to fix Grey Ridge from within, that's also their decision. But I'm not making that choice for them." I looked at him. "You came here asking me to save your pack. I'm saying no. Your pack can drown. But the wolves in your pack who want to save themselves, I'll help them. Because that's what the collective does." Gregory left, looking both relieved and disappointed. He'd wanted salvation. A hero to swoop in and fix everything. I'd offered something else. A life raft, for people willing to swim. Over the next 6 months, 43 wolves left Grey Ridge Pack and joined the collective. Families who'd been living in the mud for generations. Omegas who'd been waiting for permission to matter. Young wolves who'd heard the story of Cinderpaw and wanted to write their own. They came with nothing. Just like I had. And we gave them what I'd needed 16 years ago. Not a savior. Not a new hierarchy. Infrastructure. Opportunity. Dignity. The space to become whoever they were capable of being. Chapter 16. The Reckoning Age. 33 Alpha. George died in the winter of my 33rd year. Slowly. Painfully. The way cancer kills when you refuse treatment because you're too proud to admit you're not invincible. I didn't attend the funeral, didn't send condolences, didn't acknowledge his death at all. But I heard about it. Everyone in the outcast community heard about it, because George's death meant Gregory became Alpha, and Gregory's first act as Alpha was to send me a formal request. Not an order, not a demand, a request. Alpha Gregory of Grey Ridge Pack requests the presence of Allison Vance at the Standing Stone for a ceremony of recognition and restitution. I stared at the letter for a long time. The Standing Stone, where Father's skull had cracked, where I'd learned that mercy was weakness, and weakness had no place in Grey Ridge, where everything that made me who I was had been forged in blood and humiliation. And Gregory wanted me to go back there, for recognition and restitution. I showed the letter to my core collective members. "You don't have to go," Maria said immediately. "That place holds nothing but pain for you." "It's probably a trap," Chris added. "New Alpha trying to legitimize his rule by making nice with the exile who embarrassed them." "Or," Ruth said quietly, "it's an Alpha who understands he needs to make amends before he can move forward. Some wounds can't heal until they're acknowledged." Teresa nodded. "You taught us that dignity matters, that wolves deserve to be seen. Maybe he's finally trying to see you." I thought about it for 3 days, thought about what going back would mean. Seeing the bog where we'd lived, the central fires where I'd collected ash bread, the pack who'd called me Cinderpaw and Broken Blood, seeing the Standing Stone. I decided to go, not for Gregory, not for Grey Ridge, for the girl I'd been, for Cinderpaw who'd never been acknowledged, never been apologized to, never been told that what happened to her was wrong. She deserved to hear it, even if it came 17 years too late. The ceremony I drove to Grey Ridge territory on a Sunday morning, brought my entire core collective with me, 10 wolves in 3 cars. Because I'd learned something important. You don't walk into enemy territory alone, even when they promise safety. The pack was assembled at the Standing Stone when we arrived. Not the whole pack. Maybe 50 wolves, the ones who'd stayed after the exodus to the collective, the ones who'd chosen to try fixing things from within. Gregory stood before the stone wearing alpha regalia, looking every inch the leader his father had been, except his eyes were different. Haunted instead of hard. "Allison Vance," he said as I approached, using my legal name, not Greyridge. "Thank you for coming. You asked. I'm here. What do you want?" "To acknowledge what was done to you, to make restitution, to ask, not demand, if there's any way to begin repairing the damage." He turned to face the assembled pack. 17 years ago, this pack committed crimes against a child, against Allison, daughter of Damon and Sarah Greyridge. We executed her father unjustly. We tortured her systematically. We marked her as property. We drove her out to die. His voice cracked slightly. And we called it justice, called it pack law, called it strength. He looked at the Standing Stone. This stone has seen too much blood spilled in the name of hierarchy. Too many wolves broken because they questioned authority, or were born wrong, or just didn't fit our rigid ideas of strength. He picked up something from the base of the stone, a sledgehammer. "So today, we're changing that." He swung. The hammer connected with the Standing Stone with a sound like thunder. A crack appeared in the ancient granite. He swung again. Another crack. Again. And again. Until the Standing Stone, the symbol of Greyridge justice, the monument to brutal hierarchy, the place where my father had died, split down the middle. Half of it toppled, shattered into pieces. The pack gasped. Destroying a Standing Stone was sacrilege, was betraying centuries of tradition, was exactly what needed to happen. Gregory turned back to me. "I can't undo what was done, can't give you back the childhood we stole, can't heal the wounds we inflicted. But I can acknowledge them, can admit we were wrong, can try to build something better." He knelt. Not a dominance pose, a supplication. "I'm sorry for throwing the stone that killed your father, for whipping you at the creek, for marking you as property, for being too weak to choose you over safety, for all of it. I'm sorry." The pack watched in shocked silence. An alpha didn't kneel, especially not to an exile. But Gregory stayed on his knees, waiting for my response. I looked at him, at this man who'd hurt me and been hurt in turn, at this pack that had created both of us, at the broken Standing Stone that had seen so much cruelty justified as strength. "I don't forgive you," I said quietly. His face fell. "But I acknowledge your apology. I recognize that you're trying to be better than your father, and I appreciate the symbolism of destroying the stone." I gestured at the ruins. "But Gregory, destroying a symbol doesn't destroy the system. You want to make restitution? Actually reform Greyridge. Implement the laws I wrote. Protect vulnerable pack members. Build infrastructure that doesn't require an alpha's benevolence." "I will. I am. I've already started." "Good. Keep doing it. And when wolves in your territory need help, send them to the collective. Because we're building something better than either Greyridge or Ethelred ever were. Something that doesn't need Standing Stones or claiming bites or hierarchies that crush people into mud." I looked at the assembled pack. "You asked if there was a way to repair the damage. There is. Make sure no other child goes through what I did. Make sure Cinderpaw is the last name anyone calls a vulnerable pup. Make sure the next wolf who questions authority doesn't end up like my father." I turned to leave. "Allison," Gregory called. "Will you ever come home?" I looked back at him, at the bog in the distance where the mud hut had stood, at the broken Standing Stone, at the pack that had tried to break me. "This was never home," I said. "Home is what I built from the ashes you left. Home is the collective. Home is wolves who chose each other instead of being trapped by bloodline. But thank you for acknowledging what happened. The girl I was needed to hear it. We drove back to Stonehaven in silence. As we crossed back into neutral territory, Teresa spoke. How do you feel? I thought about it. Lighter, I said finally. Like I've been carrying something for 17 years and finally got to set it down. Do you believe he'll actually change things? I don't know. Maybe. But it doesn't matter anymore. My work isn't about fixing packs from the inside. It's about building alternatives that make the broken systems obsolete. The collective, I agreed. Epilogue. The fertile ground. Age 37, 4 years later. I'm standing on the roof of our expanded Hearthstead complex. We're not just one warehouse anymore. We're 3 buildings, 200 members, a thriving ecosystem of mutual aid and collective advancement. Below me, the courtyard is full of life. Children playing, human and shifter, pack and rogue, all mixed together without anyone caring about bloodlines. The bakery that Maria runs with 5 other former cleaners who learned they had talent for cooking. The tech hub where Chris trains young wolves in coding and cybersecurity. Ruth's clinic, now with 4 assistant healers she's personally trained. The legal aid office where I work pro bono, training a new generation of attorneys who understand that law is a tool for the vulnerable, not just the powerful. A young woman approaches me. Her name is Kara, 23 years old, from Grey Ridge. She has the claiming bite scar on her neck, same as mine. She'd been marked as property by an alpha who thought he could own her. She'd walked away, found the collective, started rebuilding. Now she runs our advocacy program, helping other marked wolves understand they're not things. They're survivors. The textile shipment arrived, she says. Also, the Ethelred Council sent another consultation request. 5th one this year. They want advice on implementing merit-based promotions. Send them our rate sheet. She grins. Already did. They're actually paying this time. Seems like their alpha heir, Liam's son, is more serious about reform than his father was. Good. Let the next generation fix what their parents broke. I look out over the collective. This thing I built from nothing. From rage and pain and the cold understanding that systems could be changed if you were patient enough. I never became alpha. Never ruled a pack. Never stood on top of anyone. But I changed the ground itself. Made it fertile where it had been barren. Made it possible for wolves like me, broken, discarded, marked as worthless, to grow into something strong. My phone rings. It's Gregory. We talk maybe once a month now. Not friends, but not enemies either. Allies in the same cause from different positions. Greyridge just graduated our first class of community organizers, he says. 15 wolves trained in conflict resolution, resource management, and advocacy. All from formerly low-status families, all going back to serve their communities. That's good work. It's your work, the model you built. I'm just implementing it. Then keep implementing. How's the council structure? Still pushback from the old guard, but the younger wolves are responding. They like having actual say in decisions, like being valued for what they contribute instead of who they're related to. Give it time. Change is generational. I know. I just wish... He stops himself. Wish what? That I'd done it 17 years ago. That I'd been brave enough to choose you over my father. That we'd built this together instead of you having to do it alone. I think about the girl by the creek. The one who believed escape was possible if she just had a partner. The one who thought love and courage could overcome hierarchy. She'd been naive, but she'd also been right about something. Change was possible, just not the way she'd imagined. Not through romantic escape or reforming from within or appealing to the better nature of people in power. Through building alternatives. Through making the old ways obsolete. Through proving, day by day, case by case, wolf by wolf, that dignity couldn't be given or taken. Only recognized. I didn't do it alone, I tell Gregory. I did it with 200 wolves who chose to build something better. That's the point. It's never about one hero or one alpha or one perfect leader. It's about systems that don't require heroes, that work even when people are flawed and scared and selfish. I'm still sorry. I know. And I've made my peace with it. You were a child forced to make impossible choices. I was a child broken by those choices. We both survived. We're both trying to make sure other children don't face the same. That's enough. I hang up and look at my hands. The same hands that collected ash bread. That changed moss packing on Father's shattered skull. That crawled through mud after being whipped. That built a law practice and fought corporations and wrote reforms that powerful people tried to bury. That built the hearthstead from nothing. These hands weren't clean, weren't pure, but they were effective. And in the end, that's what mattered. Maria calls up from the courtyard. Council meeting in 10 minutes. Budget review and the new housing proposal. I head downstairs, past the children playing without fear of being called broken blood, past the bakery where wolves work together regardless of rank, past the clinic where healing doesn't depend on whether you can afford pack prices, past all the small revolutions we've built. In the meeting, 20 voices debate resource allocation. No one voice dominates. No one opinion matters more because of bloodline. Just wolves solving problems together. It's messy, democratic always is, but it's also resilient, adaptable, impossible to destroy by removing one leader. This is what I built from the mud. Not a throne, not a kingdom, an ecosystem. And ecosystems once established grow on their own. My story became a new kind of legend. Not about a queen who conquered, about the mud dweller who taught them to build. And in 100 huts and dens and low-rent apartments, other broken blood children hear it. The storm in their eyes begins to gather. Not for vengeance, for construction. Not to tear down, to grow. They learn that prominence isn't about standing on top. It's about making sure no one has to kneel. That strength isn't about dominating others. It's about building systems strong enough to carry everyone. That dignity isn't given by alphas or earned through submission. It's inherent, unbreakable. Yours from birth. I am Allison Vance. I was Cinderpaw, broken blood. The girl in the mud who tasted like ash. I was property, marked, discarded, left to die. I became an attorney, an architect, a builder of alternatives. And I proved that what they called weakness was just potential they were too stupid to cultivate. They tried to break me in the mud. Instead, I fertilized the ground so nothing else would have to grow in barren stone. This is my prominence. This is my impact. This is what happens when you try to crush someone who understands that pressure creates diamonds. Or in my case, foundations strong enough to hold everyone they tried to bury. The end.